At long last, we continue with our readings from the Lost Book of Enki by Zecharia Sitchin. In this portion of the text, the Anunnaki continue to make adjustments in their genetic experiments revolving around the creation of a primitive worker being. I will say that as I'm reading this, we're having one heck of a storm, so I apologize for background sounds and heavy canine panting, which you might be able to hear. With no further ado, let's continue. Now this is the account of how the primitive worker was created, how Enki and Ninmah, with Ninjgazeta assisting, the being fashioned. Another way the admixture of essences to attain must be tried, Ninmah was saying. How the two strands of essences to combine another way must be found. That which from the earth is the portion must not be harmed. To receive our essence in graduations, it must be shaped. From the ME formulas of Nibiru's essence, only bit by bit could it be attempted. In a crystal vessel, Ninmah an admixture was preparing. The oval of a female, two-legged, she gently placed, with ME Anunnaki seed containing, she the oval impregnated. That oval back into the womb of the two-legged female she inserted. This time there was a conceiving. A birth was indeed forthcoming. The allotted time for the birth-giving the leaders awaited. With anxious hearts, they results were seeking. The allotted time arrived. There was no birth-giving. In desperation, Ninmah a cutting made. That which was conceived, with tongs she drew out. In other words, she performed a cesarean section. A living being it was. With glee, Enki shouted, "We attained!" Ninjgazeta with joy cried out. In her hands Ninmah the newborn held. With joy she was not filled. Shaggy, with hair all over, was the newborn. His foreparts, like of the earth creatures, were. His hind parts to those of the Anunnaki were more akin. They let the two-legged female, the newborn nurse, with her milk him to suckle. Fast was the newborn growing. What on Nibiru a day was, a month in the Abzu was. Taller the earth child grew. In the image of the Anunnaki he was not. His hands for tools were not suited. His speech only grunting sounds was. We must try once more, Ninmah was saying. The admixture needs adjusting. Let me, the MEs, essay. With this or that ME make the endeavor. With Enki and Ninjgazeta assisting, they repeated the procedures. The essences in the MEs Ninmah carefully considered. One bit she took from one bit she took out from another. Then in the crystal bowl, the oval of an earth female, she inseminated. There was conception. At the appropriate time, there was birth-giving. This one, more in the likeness of the Anunnaki, was. They let his birth mother him suckle. They let the newborn to a child grow. Appealing he was by his looks. His hands to hold tools were shapen. His senses they tested. They found them deficient. The earth child could not hear. His eyesight was faltered. Again and again, Ninmah rearranged the admixtures of the ME formulas. She took bits and pieces. One being had paralyzed feet. Another, his semen was dripping. One had trembling hands. A malfunctioning liver had another. One had hands too short to reach the mouth. One had lungs for breathing unsuited. Enki, by the results, was disappointed. A primitive worker is not attained. To Ninmah he was saying, "What is good or is bad in this being by trials I am discovering." Ninmah to Enki responded, "To continue for success my heart prompts me." Once more an admixture she made. Once more the newborn was deficient. Perchance the shortfall is not in the admixture, Enki to her was saying. Perchance neither in the female's oval nor in the essences is the hindrance. Of what the earth itself is fashioned, perchance that is what is missing. Not of Nibiru's crystals use the vessel, of the clay of earth make it. So was Enki with great wisdom possessed, to Ninmah, saying, "Perchance, what is earth's own admixture? Of gold and copper is required." Thus was Enki, he who knows things, prompting her to use the clay of the Abzu. In the house of life, Ninmah made a vessel of the Abzu's clay. She made it. As a purifying bath, she shaped the vessel within it to make the admixture. Gently into the clay vessel, the oval of an earth female, the two-legged, she put. The life essence from an Anunnaki's blood extracted, she in the vessel placed. By the ME formulas was the essence directed. Bit by correct bit was it in the vessel added. Then the oval thus fertilized into the womb of the earth female she inserted. There is conception, Ninmah with joy announced. The allotted birth-giving time they awaited. At the allotted time, the earth female began to travail. A child, a newborn, was forthcoming. With her hands, Ninmah the newborn extracted. A male it was. In her hand she held the child. His image she examined. It was the image of perfection. In her hands she held up the newborn. Enki and Ninjgazeta were present. With joyful laughter the three leaders were seized. Enki and Ninjgazeta were backslapping. Ninmah Enki embraced and kissed. Your hands have made it, Enki with the gleaming eye to her was saying. They let the birth-giving mother the newborn suckle. Quicker than a child on Nibiru grows, he was growing. From month to month the newborn progressed. From a baby to a child he was becoming. His limbs for the tasks were suited. Speech he knew not. Of speaking he had no understanding. Grunts and snorts were his utterings. Enki the matter was pondering. What was done each step and admixture he considered. Of all that we had tried and changed, one thing was never altered, to Ninmah he was saying. Into the womb of the earth female the fertilized oval was always inserted. Perchance this is the remaining obstruction, thus was Enki saying. Ninmah at Enki gazed. With bewilderment she was beheld. What in truth are you saying? Of him she an answer required. Of the birth-giving womb am I speaking? To her Enki was responding. Of who the fertilized oval nurtures, to birth-giving carries, in our image and after our likeness to be, perchance an Anunnaki womb is required. In the house of life there was silence. Words never before heard Enki was uttering. They gazed at each other. About what in each other's mind they were thinking. Wise are your words, my brother, Ninmah at long last was saying. Perchance the right admixture in the wrong womb was inserted. Now, where is the female among the Anunnaki, her womb to offer? Perchance the perfect primitive worker to create? Perchance a monster in her belly to carry? So was Ninmah with a trembling voice saying. Let me of Ninki, my spouse, of that inquire, Enki was saying. Let us her to the house of life summon, the matter before her lay out. He was turning to depart when Ninmah put her hand on his shoulder. No, no, to Enki she was saying. The admixtures by me were made. Reward and endangerment should be mine. I shall be the one the Anunnaki womb to provide, for good or evil fate to face. Enki bowed his head. Gently he embraced her. So be it, to her he said. In the clay vessel the admixture they made. The oval of an earth female with Anunnaki male essence they put together. The fertilized egg into the womb of Ninmah by Enki was inserted. There was conception. The pregnancy by an admixture conceived. How long will it last? To each other they wondered. Will it be 9 months of Nibiru? Will it be 9 months of earth? Longer than on earth, quicker than on Nibiru, travail came. To a male child Ninmah birth was giving. Enki, the boy child, held in his hands. The image of perfection he was. He slapped the newborn on his hind parts. The newborn uttered proper sounds. He handed the newborn to Ninmah. She held him up in her hands. My hands have made it, victoriously she shouted. Now this is the account of how Adamu by name was called, and how Tiamat, as a counterpart female for him, was fashioned. The newborn's visage and limbs the leaders carefully examined. Of good shape were his ears. His eyes were not clogged. His limbs were proper. Hind parts like legs, fore parts like hands were shaped. Shaggy like the wild ones he was not. Dark black his head hair was. Smooth was his skin, smooth as the Anunnaki skin it was. Like dark red blood was its color, like the clay of the Abzu was its hue. They looked at his malehood. Odd was its shape. By a skin was its foreparts surrounded. Unlike that of the Anunnaki malehood it was. A skin from its forepart was hanging. Let the earthling from us Anunnaki by this foreskin be distinguished, so was Enki saying. The newborn to cry was beginning. To her chest Ninmah closely drew him. Her breast to him she gave. The breast he began to suckle. Perfection we did attain, Ninshgazida with elation was saying. Enki at his sister was gazing. A mother and a son, not Ninmah and a being, he was seeing. A name will you give him? Enki inquired. A being he is, not a creature. Ninmah cast her hand upon the newborn's body. With her fingers his dark red skin she caressed. Adamu, I shall call him, Ninmah was saying. One who is like the earth's clay is. That will be his name. For the newborn Adamu, a crib they fashioned, in a corner of the house of life they placed him. A model for primitive workers we have indeed attained, Enki was saying. Now a host of workers like him are needed, Ninshgazida, his elders reminded. A model indeed he shall be. As for himself, like a firstling he shall be treated. From toil he himself shall be protected. His essence alone as a mold shall be. So was Enki saying. By his decree, Ninmah was greatly pleased. Whose wombs henceforth the fertilized oval shall carry? Ninshgazida was asking. The leaders the matter pondered. Ninmah a solution offered. From her city, Shurubak, Ninmah female healers summoned. The task required to them, she explained. To the crib of Adamu she led them, the newborn earthling to perceive. To perform the task is not a commandment, Ninmah to them was saying. Your own wish is the decision. Of the female Anunnaki assembled, 7 stepped forward. 7 the task accepted. Let their names for all time be remembered, Ninmah to Enki was saying. Their task is heroic. By them a race of primitive workers shall come into being. The 7 stepped forward. Each one her name was announcing. The names Ninshgazida recorded. Ninimah, Shuziana, Ninmada, Ninbara, Ninmug, Masaradu, and Ninguna. These were the names of the 7 who by their own wish birth mothers were to be, earthlings in their wombs to conceive and bear, primitive workers to create. In 7 vessels of the clay of the Abzu made, Ninmah ovals of the 2-legged females placed. The life essence of Adamu she extracted, bit by bit in the vessels it inserted. Then in the male part of Adamu an incision she made, a drop of blood to let out. Let this a sign of life be, that flesh and soul have combined, let it forever proclaim. She squeezed the male part for blood, 1 drop of blood in each vessel to the admixture she added. In this clay's admixture, earthling with the Anunnaki shall be bound. Thus was Ninmah saying, an incantation she was pronouncing. To a unity shall the 2 essences, one of heaven, one of earth, together be brought. That which is of earth, and that which is from Nibiru, by a blood kinship, shall be bonded. So was Ninmah pronouncing. Her words Ninshgazida also recorded. In the wombs of the birth-giving heroines, the fertilized ovals were inserted. There was conception. With anticipation was the allotted time counted. At the allotted time, birth-givings were occurring. At the allotted time, 7 male earthlings were born. Their features were proper. Good sounds they were uttering. By the heroines they were suckled. 7 primitive workers have been created, Ninshgazida was saying. Let the procedure be repeated. 7 more the toil to undertake. My son, to him Enki was saying. Not even 7 by 7 sufficient shall be. Of heroine healers too much is required. Forever their task this way shall be. Indeed, the task is too demanding. Slow beyond enduring it is, Ninmah to them was saying. Female ones we have to fashion, Enki was saying. for males' counterparts to be. Let them know each other as one flesh, the two to become. Then let them by themselves procreate, on their own the childbirthing make. To primitive workers by themselves give birth, Anunnaki females to relieve. The ME formulas you must change, from male to female adjustment make, so did Enki to Ninshgazita say. For a counterpart to Adamo to be fashioned, in the womb of an Anunnaki female conception is needed. So did Ninshgazita to his father Enki in responding say. Enki at Ninmah his gaze directed. Before she could speak, he raised his hand. Let me this time Ninki, my spouse, summon. With strong voice he said, if she is willing, let her the mold for the female earthling create. They to the Abzu, to the house of life, Ninki summoned. They showed her Adamo. All that matters to her, they explained. Of the task that is required, they gave explanations. Of success and danger, to her an account gave. By the task, Ninki was fascinated. Let it be done, she said to them. By the ME formulas Ninshgazita adjusting made, by the admixture was an oval fertilized. Into the womb of his spouse, Enki, it inserted with much care. He did it. There was conception. In the allotted time, Ninki was in travail. A birth there was not. Ninki the months counted. Ninmah the months counted. The 10th month, a month of evil fates, they began to call. Ninmah, the lady whose hand wombs has opened, with a cutter and incision made. Her head was covered, on her hands protection she wore. With dexterity, the opening she made, her face at once was brightened. That which in the womb was, from the womb, came forth. A female. A female birth was given. To Ninki with joy she shouted. The newborn's visage and limbs they carefully examined. Of good shape were her ears. Her eyes were not clogged. Her limbs were proper. Hind parts like legs, fore parts like hands were shaped. Shaggy she was not. Like beach sands were the hue of her head hair. Her skin smooth was, as that of the Anunnaki in smoothness and color it was. Ninmah, the girl child, held in her hands. She slapped her hind parts. Proper sounds, the newborn uttered. To Ninki, the spouse of Enki, she, the newborn, handed, to be suckled, nourished, and raised. A name will you give her? Enki of his spouse inquired. A being she is, not a creature. In your image she is, and after your likeness. Perfectly she is fashioned, a model for female workers you have attained. Ninki cast her hand upon the newborn's body. With her fingers her skin she caressed. Tiamat, let her name be, the mother of life, Ninki was saying. Like the planet of old, of which the earth and the moon were fashioned, let her be called. From her womb's life essences of other birth givers shall be molded. To a multitude of primitive workers she thereby life will be giving. Thus was Ninki saying. The others words of concurring uttered.